next part of what we're going into. And so some of those, what does good loading look like? How many hours, or how do we know that we're balanced as well?
Yeah, sure. And the more I've looked into this week for the webinar, I think possibly the more confusing it gets. But I'm just going to try and point out, this little subtitle here is that the capacity of an athlete to load is actually dependent on their hormone networks and their maturation stage. So the answer, like with lots of things, it depends.
It depends.
So this slide is, we talk about loading, and on the left, we obviously have the type of load, the intensity and the frequency. Now, if we're talking about young female athletes, if we're talking about children who are in this kind of prepubescent or early puberty stage, then we know that some types of exercise are better than others and some types of load are better than others. Now, the reason for that is that, as I was sort of talking about with that maturation of the musculoskeletal system, is we know that their bones, they may be longer and they may be getting taller, but their bones will be particularly in a period of particular weakness because the bone density hasn't happened yet. So you can imagine then that loading that skeletal system heavily through lots of jumping and landing and, lots of load-bearing exercise, whilst we know that load-bearing exercise is really good for bone, if the bone is not able to withstand it, we start to get that breakdown, right?
Yeah. So it's just getting that balance right, eh?
Yeah, I think you just got to be, so loading is more about the biological age of the athlete than it is about the chronological age. So we could have a 14-year-old girl who still has not started menstruating, that's on the really early spectrum of puberty, might be late developer, and then we can have a 14-year-old who's already been cycling for 18 months, who has 18 more months of bone mineral density, who has 18 more months of estrogen in the system to protect the skeletal tissue, who has 18 more months of an endocrine system. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I know that doesn't really help, that may not help parents, but I think what you need to look at is my child, I guess if I wanted to talk about my own experience, my young daughter's 13. She started the early signs of puberty probably around 9, like pretty 9 or 10, pretty common age. But I think that she hasn't then moved into that next stage where the sex hormones are actually being produced in big proportions. So she's tall and she's very lean, but her skeletal system is not robust. So I have to be really careful about how much she does because her body doesn't tolerate it. And she will be one of the kids, and some of the parents on this call might be seeing that they will have their children will kind of complain about little aches and pains regularly and often. So she'll have a sore ankle one day and then she'll have a sore shin the next and a sore knee and a because the skeletal system. So she is better off, and again, when we talk about courageous conversations, she's better off having days off in between. She's better off doing lots of different sports and not heaps of the same thing. And that's, again, because of her stage of growth and the stage of her hormone production. And that has a big effect on your bone and your soft tissue and your body systems. So hopefully that works.
So moving into, I guess, the next bit then is going what recovery looks like as well, and what really good recovery, and how we can, what signs do we need to maybe think about, or what are some of the things that as parents they need to think about what recovery looks like.
Yeah, okay. I feel like there's so many questions, and I know people are probably sitting in the chat thinking, answer more questions about my load. And we can do some more at the end. But yeah, you're right. Next thing is to talk about recovery. And again, I guess what I'm trying to get across is a little bit of the depth around why it's important, because I think parents, we've all had some face value advice for a long time. I think a lot of people kind of know, but the reason that recovery is so important and vital, and good recovery, is because that's when the hormones work their magic. So people will often think that kids and athletes in general are getting fitter when they're playing sport and they're training, but in actual fact, the only training that you're benefiting from is the training you're recovering from. So hormones actually go to work, burrowing away and flicking on signals when we're sleeping and when we're resting. So if we're not giving young athletes and female athletes a chance to recover, those hormone networks just don't start to kick in. And so there's that down regulation. Now, remember, again, we know that recovery has to be supported with good nutrition. So recovery and nutrition plus training stimulus are the three big things, right? So we said that at the start. But essentially that is the gold is in the rest and recovery. And so that is why at a young age we say you must try and we really want young people to have at least 1 day off, and probably 2 to be fair. If you get the recovery right, then what you'll start to see is, just on this slide, is you will get good performance. So it's about athletes can keep performing. They're getting better because the hormones are working to drive the adaptation to training. So performance gets better. They make some gains. They're enthusiastic about being there. They are more protected against injury and illness. So under recovery is one of our biggest signs of ill health or unbalanced health, and unbalanced health is one of our biggest drivers around injury and illness. So and then also we will see just a general mental wellness of people in terms with regards to sport. I'm saying, not mental health, but you will have athletes who have good mood, who are motivated to train, who want to be there, enthusiastic, can take in those directions and instructions and stuff. So that's how we kind of know that recovery is going well. So
we've just had a question really quickly come through. What does a day off look like? Like, is it literally a day off from sport training, or is it like, what does a day off, or is it a day off from school? What would a good rest day look like?
Yeah, again, I don't want to say it depends because it's the most frustrating answer. But if you go back to thinking about growth and development, I guess it kind of does. But if it was a young athlete, I would say a day off means a complete day off. Now, bearing in mind that doesn't necessarily mean not going for a little walk around town and going out for lunch and stuff, but it doesn't also mean that day off gets replaced with a family hike because they're not having a day of football practice. It does really mean a day off. And I think sometimes the gold is in, we'll often complain about teenagers being, lazy and lying around and stuff. But in actual fact, if their life is balanced and they are training and then they're recovering, it actually might look like recovery.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. In terms of older athletes, whereby their musculoskeletal and endocrine systems are more developed, and a rest day might look a little bit more like an active rest day, a really light training. But again, the recovery should really be periodized. So it means that sometimes in your season, the recovery might not need to be so much, and at other times it needs to be a complete day off. And that's that kind of balance of knowing when to pull back. So and we're going to go into this in a while, just to sort of screen your children about whether they're looking like they're in balanced health. If you're seeing some of the signs of an unbalanced healthy athlete, then that's the time to kind of pull back and be more aggressive on that rest and recovery so that you get that positive adaptation. If you're feeling like you're not seeing those signs, it's in the early part of a season, it might mean that you don't have to be quite so aggressive. And young people, though, always push for more recovery, I guess.
I think, Andrea, if this is coming in the chat, is it a day off from school? I think if they're trying to pull a day off from school, they might be pulling a leg a bit there. So look, moving into the next kind of part, so and we edged into it then as well, is going, well, how do we start having these conversations advocating? What are the signs that we need to look out for? Maybe how do we start to have those conversations? Because there's a few in here, a few questions and a few comments going, geez, how do I talk to my coaches, to my kids' coaches and things like that? Or what do I need to be looking out for?
Yeah, sure. It's a hard one. And I think, when I talk to coaches as well, I'm really encouraging them to be courageous, because I think coaches, and if you're a parent on here who is a coach, I think sometimes you have to be a change maker. You have to be a bit of a leader. And if you see a child or an athlete struggling, I think having that ability to say to them, you deserve a break. I think you need a break. I don't need you tonight. We're going to take rotations of people having rest days. That would be great. That would be ideal. I'm just going to skip to a wee slide. I think that this is a wee slide where essentially you can go through a bit of a checklist of what you're looking for. Remembering that when we're looking at adolescents, we're looking at this concept of what they're doing, how they're recovering, and what they're eating. So then we look at these signs that those three things might not be in good balance, I guess. So for female athletes, it's about checking in on menstruation. And as parents, I'd really encourage just kind of knowing those sort of four things we talked about. Do they have one? Is it regular? Are they taking hormonal contraception? It might just be needing to be more aware of that. If they are taking contraception that affects ovulation, you need to be even more aware of these other 5 categories. Nutrition, keeping an eye on, the most important thing is keeping an eye on young females who are beginning to show signs of disordered eating practices, and that's skipping particular food groups or only using food as a reward. The other things is, as parents, is really supporting a lot of food going with them. So planning and preparing. And body image issues, obviously, and social media. So those sorts of things, again, another big topic. Sleep. So again, all the concepts around sleep hygiene are actually really important, obviously, because 8 hours of sleep is what a young athlete needs to reduce their injury and illness risk. So if they get less than 8 hours of sleep, they are 1.8 times more likely to get injured or ill. And it has a massive effect on mental health and the ability to recover. So remembering that that's when our hormones are doing their best work. So that's vitally important. And the hours before midnight are really important as well. So as parents, it's just continuing to try and I guess, again, just trying to come at it from a health angle and a performance angle rather than a parental angle that we often come at it from. I think I was going to say something else, but I can't remember. Injury and illness. So one of the big things as a physio for female athletes is keeping an eye on bone health. So bone is really, really vital in females because we are at greater risk of bone mineral density issues and osteoporosis. If your child is having unexplained or pain in bones that does not come from a particular injury, so it's just a sort of an onset that comes with training, it doesn't go away, it's painful at rest, we want to be looking into those things, and we want to be considering all the other things that go with it, so the menstruation, nutrition and sleep, and get a physio to check it over. If they have a history of bone injury, they're more likely to get another one. And also this other concept of getting injured and ill in quite quick succession, which is called the injury illness cascade. How motivated are they about training? Has it changed recently? Is there big loads, that have they changed into a higher performance kind of area? Those sorts of things. And really their mood in and around their sport. Do they want to go? Do they appear to be stressed about it? Are they concerned? Those sorts of things.